that there's no justification to try to explain away the soul of the animal. A lot of this theory came in with the rascal philosopher Descartes. He was one of the first to give religions and the people in general the idea that animals had no soul. He was actually, again, I'm sure, doing the bidding of some secret society or some religious organization who wanted to, ramp up the slaughter of animals as a kind of control mechanism to pollute the minds of men so that they would never be interested in upliftment or enlightenment, but rather they would be degraded into accepting their slave condition. And Descartes' main point about why, in his theoretical and philosophical discussions and papers about why he said that animals have no soul, is because they can't communicate. Now, I think even just about everybody today, even a child, admits and knows that animals have systems of communication. So this kind of idea that animals don't communicate or that they have no soul is actually an extremely outdated concept. And anyone with even the slightest bit of common sense can see that basically animals are all performing the same functions as human beings. And therefore, because they have life, they've been given that soul by the Supreme Creator. They have a right to live, a right to exist, a right to experience life to its fullest as best they can, and that this kind of outdated thinking that everything is based around human consciousness and that whatever we're doing is actually the pinnacle and we're so much more advanced than everything else and everyone else, this outdated mode of thinking has to be given up. Another thing we discussed, kind of summarizing what we talked about last time, was the concept of prayer. Now, there's some theories going around, and they're partially true, in that if ever we pray or try to have a dialogue with the Supreme Personalities of Godhead, that this is some kind of way of giving up our power. In some circumstances, this is true. If people don't understand the nature of the Supreme Lord, or they don't understand their own nature, and they're praying in kind of a ritualistic way, these things can be detrimental. But in the sense that here we're revealing that the personal feature of the Supreme Lord, and one proof of the personal feature of the Supreme Lord is that, let's assume for a moment that there is a Godhead. So that Godhead would have to contain everything that the other living entities would contain, and perhaps even more, in the sense that he, she would be the creator of the living entities. So I have a personal feature. You have a personal feature. Every living entity has a personal feature. How could the supreme living entity, or the supreme living entities in the sense that there's male and female, how could they lack in the personal feature when every other living entity has that? The Supreme Godhead cannot lack in any feature that the ordinary living entities have. So therefore, in the ultimate feature of Godhead, there must be a personality. So if prayer is in the sense of a dialogue between the individual living entity and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as a kind of a dialogue, this is the actual meaning and the purpose of prayer, is to engage in a dialogue with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is not to become a submissive slave servant to that being. So, also the true nature of prayer was revealed within this chapter, that prayer is a communion between the living entity and the Supreme Lord. Okay, and as another, I'm just going to talk a little bit, one final thing about the knowledge in the summary that we've discussed in the previous shows, and discussing the Srimad Bhagavatam, and specifically chapter 17, was another solution, was that the good news is that within this age of Kali, which lasts for 432,000 years, of which we've only passed through 5,000, which means that we have another 427,000 to go, which is the age of iron, the age of quarrel and hypocrisy, that within this age, there's actually a mini golden age. And this mini golden age started with the advent of the great sage and saint, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared in India 500 years ago, and that he would preach an understanding of the absolute truth, which was very practical and could be put into effect very easily within this age, and that this knowledge would be spread throughout the entire world, and it would go on for 10,000 years. So within the age of Kali, which is a very disturbed age, which has a lot of dark features, there is a mini golden age, which we are 500 years into. And this is marked by the advent and purpose of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu inaugurated the Sankirtan movement. So this is another solution. Besides austerity, mercy, cleanliness, and truthfulness, this is even a more practical, some practical ideas of how we can put this into effect. And I'm going to speak that there's three main features of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement. The first of which is the protection of animals, especially the cow and bull, because of the detrimental psychological, spiritual, material, health degradation that the slaughter of the cow and bull and other animals causes, that Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu recommended the protection of all animals, and especially the protection of cows and bulls, because the cow is like the mother, the bull is like the father. We've discussed previously in this show and other shows that the cow is the representation of Mother Earth, the bull is the representation of Dharma. So without protecting these animals, it leaves us open as a society and personally to a lot of psychological injury. It leaves us open to a lot of manipulation because of the degraded state of our consciousness. So this is the first feature of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu's mini golden age Sankirtan movement, which we can participate in right now, which will extend for another 9,500 years. The second feature is the vibration through musical instruments of the glorification of the supreme couple, the divine couple, according to the time, place, and circumstance of the individuals on this planet. So it's not any hard and fast rules, but the idea is to gather together with friends and family, to have some discussion of your understanding of the absolute truth, and then to raise your voices in song and celebration to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in a prayer of thanksgiving for all the wonderful things that He's brought into our life and for our very existence. So the second feature is discussions and the use of musical instruments to vibrate righteous sound vibration that will reach up to the very spiritual planets. Okay, then the third feature of the Sankirtan movement, which will inaugurate the Golden Age within Kali Yuga, is that to understand that Mother Earth is supplying us with all the foodstuffs that sustain our body, and that this is also kind of goes on in the Christian and many religions still to this day, is that before we eat, before we take sustenance and nourishment, that we offer a prayer of thanksgiving out loud to the Creator of all that be and to Mother Earth, thanking them for the bounty of the earth. And this is kind of the idea of Thanksgiving and other holidays. But, of course, this would be vegetarian foodstuffs. But that we vibrate with loving intent, Thanksgiving. And then the foodstuff actually becomes transformed into spiritual foodstuffs, which can, just by the imbibing that food alone, can bring us to a higher level of spiritual realization and spiritual power. It becomes more of a communion. In that regard, people can check out the work of Dr. Emoto from Japan, who he vibrates different words across water and freezes them instantaneously. And when he vibrates words with loving intent, like joy or love or freedom, the crystals become formed in a very beautiful pattern of the water, become very beautiful, very symmetrical, almost looking like flowers or crystalline structures of great beauty. But when he vibrates sounds with hateful intent, words like jealousy, envy, or hatred, that the crystals become very much malformed, almost looking like a diseased organism. So he's proving through his work that loving intent of sound vibration is extremely important, and it can even transform material elements such as water, which is the basis of all food. So this is an important and third and important feature of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement, Golden Age movement, is to vibrate with loving intent sound vibration across the foodstuffs that you're eating before you partake. And this will transform the very nature of the food. And when you take that, it will be a type of communion with spiritual power that through that communion you will be uplifted. One final thing that I know we're running a little bit late here on the time. I just wanted to reinforce some of the ideas about cow protection. And so I'm going to read some verses and do a little comment on them in the short amount of time that we have left to demonstrate that cow protection is not just a religious sentiment or maybe perhaps a nice idea, but it's actually something that we can do in a practical sense to change the world, and it's very, very important to our psychological health and to the health of society in general. This is a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 4, Canto 4, chapter 30, verse 44. And the title is, "One need only to work to produce grains and take care of the cows. All economic problems can be solved in that way." Thereafter, all the prachetas emerged from the waters of the sea. They then saw that all the trees on the land had grown very tall, as if to obstruct the path to the heavenly planets. These trees had covered the entire surface of the world. At this time, the prachetas became very angry. Now, this verse is very interesting in the sense that the prachetas were very advanced living entities, and they were so advanced and had breathed down their breathing so much that they could actually live within the water. So we have a lot of tales from the past about ancient Atlantis and different ideas like this. So it's very possible that this verse can refer to some of the progenitors of the ancient civilization of Atlantis in the sense that they're very much tied with the water, and they could even live within the water. Purport by Bhaktivedanta Swami. King Prachini left his kingdom before his sons arrived after their execution of penance and austerity. The sons, the prachetas, were ordered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to come out of the water and go to the kingdom of their father in order to take care of that kingdom. However, when they came out, they saw that everything had been neglected due to the king's absence. They first observed that food grains were not being produced and that there were no agricultural activities. Indeed, the surface of the world was practically covered by very tall trees. It seemed as though the trees were determined to stop people from going into outer space to reach the heavenly kingdoms. The prachetas became very angry when they saw the surface of the globe covered in this way. They desired that the land be cleared for crops. It is not a fact that jungles and trees attract clouds and rain, because we find rainfall over the sea. Human beings can inhabit any place on the surface of the earth by clearing jungles and converting the land for agricultural purposes. People can keep cows, and all economic problems can be solved in that way. One need only to work to produce grains and take care of the cows. The wood found in the jungles may be used for constructing cottages. In this way, the economic problem of humanity can be solved. At the present moment, there are many, many vacant lands throughout the world, and if they are properly utilized, there will be no scarcity of food. Anyway, we're about to run out of time. I would like to thank everyone for listening, and I hope that you found some enlightenment in these words. And next week, we'll be moving on further in the Srimad Bhagavatam and discussing some other interesting sections of that literature. I'd like to thank everyone for listening, and if you want more information, you can go to my website, protectacow.typepad.com, or you can just Google the word Protect a Cow or the words Protect a Cow, and you'll come to my website where there's a lot more information.